It is a 2-hour long movie. At first I was really annoyed because I was like, damn it, like teen movies shouldn't be so long. I like 90-minute movies. But then when I got to the last 30 minutes, I was like, oh, this is why it's 2 hours long. Hello and welcome back to the Miscellaneous channel where we do miscellaneous things. I'm Zeleny. I typically cover TV, pop culture, internet trends, and the miscellaneous things on this channel, so subscribe if that's your vibe. So today I wanted to cover a new teen movie called Do Revenge. It's a new Netflix movie starring Camila Mendes and Hawke. First, let's talk about, is Do Revenge worth watching? I actually say yes. In general, Do Revenge is worth watching. It depends how much you like teen media already. But I do believe Do Revenge transcends the teen media genre. It's not the kind of movie that follows a generic template for a teen movie or a high school movie that you see often. It's an elevated teen movie. It has a very curated aesthetic, and it is more of a dark comedy. Like I said, it also has these two powerhouses as a main character duo that has really interesting chemistry and balance each other out. A lot of great acting in it, a lot of witty writing to it. It also depicts Gen Z, but also is timeless because it references so many past works. For me, it was really fun to pick out all the homages I saw to 2000s teen movies that I grew up with. I liked it a lot. It has twists and turns. I just generally recommend it. It actually has a good rating on Rotten Tomatoes as well. At first, it did have a 92%, I think, from critics, which is kind of unheard of for a teen movie. And I think now it's hovering around the low 80%. Certified fresh for sure. And it is the #1 movie on Netflix as I'm recording this. Like, teen movies never get this kind of recognition, but I can see why this one would, and I'm glad people are talking about it, people are recommending it. Even if you're not someone that watches a lot of teen movies, I think if you like a dark comedy and some campiness, you should definitely check out this movie. If you have seen the trailer though, the movie was not as gay as it was advertised. Like, I don't think I would call it queer baiting by any means, but I do think I was just expecting something a little different from the romance side of the movie. So let me talk about Do Revenge. Like I said, it's on Netflix. Like any good teen movie, this story is based on an older story from history. Not Shakespeare though, like a lot of the movies from my youth were. This is based on a 1951 Alfred Hitchcock movie called Strangers on a Train, where two men meet on a train, two strangers. They both have these arch enemy figures that wronged them, and they come to an agreement to murder each other's arch enemies so that the murders won't end up being tied to them. It's a little extreme. Do Revenge was not as extreme, but the story had to be adapted to teen characters. The writer of Do Revenge is Jennifer Robinson, and this is only her second movie that she has written on her own, or written directed. Her first movie was another Netflix one called Someone Great in 2019. I actually really love Someone Great. It's kind of one of my favorite modern girly movies. It does have a little bit of a girl boss media vibe. However, I think Someone Great really depicts grief in a way I really, really appreciate, and it has helped me through moments of grief in my own life. I was excited to see it was the same writer-director. And Jennifer Robinson also co-wrote Thor: Love and Thunder with Taika Waititi, which is like, wow, she's working. Fun fact, apparently Jennifer Robinson, according to Wikipedia, made it to final round auditions to play Lily on Hannah Montana. Hannah Montana's best friend. And then the cast of Do Revenge is semi-stacked. I mean, the main duo is pretty famous. First, we have Camila Mendes. You might know her from Riverdale. She plays Veronica on that show. And then second, we have Hawke. You might know her from Nepotism. No, you'll probably know her from Stranger Things. She plays Robin. She's Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's child, and it was crazy. In Do Revenge, I saw a lot of Uma Thurman come out in Hawke, which was very interesting. And then also Austin Abrams plays like one of the main guys, and I didn't know much about him. I kind of wasn't a fan watching this movie, but apparently he plays Ethan on Euphoria. I know Ethan dated Kat on Euphoria. I learned that from my investigation on Euphoria without having to watch the show. And then also in this movie is Sophie Turner, who I didn't really recognize the first time around because, again, I don't know her that well because I don't watch Game of Thrones either. She's kind of billed high up because she's a big name. And I expected her to be in the movie more, but she kind of just had more of a cameo role in this. And then finally, of known names, this movie has Sarah Michelle Gellar, which is really fun. People keep calling it a cameo, but it's not. It's like a proper minor-ish character. She's like the main adult in the movie. Let's get right into the setup, and it is complicated. Like I said, I do recommend watching the movie. My recap can't really do it justice because the story is pretty intricate and complex and has twists and turns. This one is just worth seeing. The main setup of this movie is that Drea, played by Camila Mendes, is a very popular girl at her school. It's a very elite, rich school, and she is actually poor and they're on scholarship. She did a lot of work to get in with the popular crowd and become one of their ringleaders. The way she did that was by dating the main guy leader of the popular crowd named Max, and this is the one played by Austin Abrams. Drea gets featured in Teen Vogue. She has aspirations to go to Yale. Her best friend in the popular group throws her this elaborate birthday party or something at the beginning. The whole school envies her. It's classic most popular girl in school narrative. And then we see her hanging out with Max, her boyfriend, and he convinces her to send him a nude video of herself. After she does that, the video gets mysteriously leaked. Max claims that he was hacked, but Drea is sure that he leaked the video to the entire school. This completely ruins her social standing, and going into the summer before her senior year, her social status has just tanked. The popular crew doesn't want anything to do with her anymore. Apparently Max had all the power in the group. I thought they didn't do kind of a clear job of showing how Max ruled the school at the beginning. Like, I was kind of confused on that on my first watch, and Drea had to say it later on that he rules the school for me to understand. I wish they had shown it in the beginning scene. Drea actually punches Max and gets sent to the principal's office, and she's the one that suffers consequences instead of him because his story is that he got hacked, so like he can't suffer real consequences for this. Over the summer, Drea meets Eleanor at tennis camp, and Eleanor is played by Hawke, and she is definitely more of a grungy, tomboy-esque fashion, while Drea is very, very preppy and girly in her fashion sense. Eleanor is like into cars, and she's also queer. She mentions that towards the beginning. And Eleanor hears other girls talk about the leaked sex tape of Drea, and Eleanor shows Drea some empathy and pity, and Drea is kind of mad that she did that, but eventually they get to talking. Eleanor tells her, I understand how you feel because I had a girl ruin my life when I was 13. At the beginning of the movie, Eleanor does not go to Rose Hill, the rich elite school that Drea goes to. Eleanor is about to transfer to Rose Hill after the summer. It's kind of like in Greece where they meet in the summer and then she ends up transferring, or sorry, I should say, it's like in High School Musical where Troy and Gabriella meet, and then Gabriella, after the break, transfers into Troy's school. Eleanor tells her that when she was 13, this girl ruined her life by telling everybody that she held her down and tried to kiss her. Basically, that made everyone think that Eleanor was a predator. She had just come out to this girl, and this alleged holding down and kissing did not happen. Eleanor's like, this girl actually goes to Rose Hill, and Drea's like, who is it? Because she goes there. Eleanor says it was Carissa that did this. That becomes important later on. So after they start school in the fall, Eleanor and Drea meet up again in the bathroom, and they discuss how they should execute each other's revenge on the people that ruined their lives. So Eleanor should tear down Max, and Drea will tear down Carissa. And because they do it like that, the revenge won't be traced back to them and hurt their chances of going to Yale. For Drea, the dream and the whole goal she's working towards is getting into Yale. So when they make this agreement in the bathroom, it's when the movie gets going. Eleanor even says, I can't do revenge. I always find it interesting in a movie where they say the title. I'm always like, the title. So after this agreement, they go into executing each other's plans. Drea goes after Carissa by volunteering on the student farm because Carissa is like a hippie granola type that runs the school farm, and she's also cooking the senior ring ceremony dinner. This whole movie is very stylized, very rich and preppy. Like, it's not meant to depict actual high school. It's bougie, it's campified. So Drea volunteers for this school farm where Carissa runs it, and she also meets Russ there, who ends up becoming a bit of a love interest. And Drea quickly finds out that Carissa has a secret greenhouse where she's growing something mysterious. Eventually she figures out how to get the keys to it, goes in there with Eleanor, and finds what she suspected, a bunch of weed and mushrooms. Carissa, since she's cooking the big senior dinner, Drea decides to put mushrooms in the soup for everybody and make everyone trip on mushrooms. That makes it look like Carissa drugged everybody, and it leads the principal, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, to discover the greenhouse and the drugs. So Carissa ends up getting sent to a rehab facility and expelled from the school. Drea's plan to get Carissa is successful. Fun fact, by the way they put in the mushrooms in the soup would not actually make everybody trip. For mushrooms to become magic, they need to be dehydrated first. It's a technicality, and I appreciated the edginess of including psychedelics in this. Drea's plan is easier to execute because she says Carissa is a woman, and a lot of the theme of the movie is about patriarchy and how the patriarchy makes women turn against each other, how it's easy to tear down a woman, the way Drea was torn down at the beginning, the way she was easily able to tear down Carissa. That's why their plan to tear down Max is a lot harder and more elaborate. It takes way longer in the movie. Max is difficult because he is the most popular guy in school. He's class president. He's very much a performative ally at the beginning. He starts this cisgendered male allies of women, students, or whatever. I enjoyed this aspect of the movie, like exaggerating the performative allyship that Max had. Like, it's dramatized, but it is making a point with how sometimes even the men that seem like feminists and seem like allies end up being some of the worst offenders, using that position of power as leverage over the people they're saying they're allies to, but actually like destroying them, like the way he did to Drea by leaking her sex tape to the school. So the plan to tear down Max is to give Eleanor a makeover. We have to have a makeover montage. And it was funny because they were self-aware about it. They were like, this is problematic to have a makeover montage, but they did it anyways. Everything's meta now. We just gotta accept it. After Eleanor gets made over by Drea, she walks by Max and he instantly notices her, tries to flirt, and starts getting invited to his parties. At one of his parties, she discovers texts with Max and a bunch of different girls at the school. He dates girls from different cliques. At the beginning of the school year, we find out that Max is publicly dating Drea's former best friend from the popular group, the one who threw her the party at the beginning. So Max has a public girlfriend, but he's still having sexual or flirty relationships with a bunch of girls at the school. Eleanor and Drea actually expose these DMs and texts with other girls. Then Max, with the help of his new public girlfriend, he's able to spin the situation and say he's actually polyamorous and it's actually really progressive and feminist of him, and everyone in the school is excited that they have a chance with him because he's poly. Max sends like his whole popular group to like spread his message of polyamory, and there's the one guy that's like obsessed with eating ass. So because Max gets fully redeemed, they write a magazine article about him that, you know, he's the ultimate accidental feminist or whatever. Drea gets called into the principal's office and gets notified that she got rejected from Yale. And after this rejection is where Drea becomes a little bit more unhinged. Like, one of her more psycho moments is where she is having sex with her new boyfriend, Russ, who, by the way, Russ was Carissa's best friend, and Drea got Carissa expelled. And Russ is dating Drea and doesn't even know that she got his best friend expelled. That's so sad. He's trying to have sex with her and she's making fake noises while looking at Instagram stories. And it was just one of these moments that showed how obsessed with revenge she had become. Also, Drea starts being a lot more cold towards Eleanor at this point when she loses Yale. Eleanor is trying to get her to hang out with her for her birthday, and Drea's like, sure, whatever, but what are we gonna do for Max? You know, she doesn't care. Throughout this whole process of taking each other's bullies down or whatever, Eleanor and Drea had gotten kind of close. There was one low point where Drea basically describes that she has depression. She doesn't say the word depression, but she says, you know, it's painful to exist. I have this empty feeling in my chest. And it's a very vulnerable moment in the bedroom. Though nothing romantic ever came of them two, that moment felt really intimate. And I remember seeing screen grabs of it and thinking, oh, they're gonna get together in this movie, but they don't. After Drea's aloof with Eleanor, the popular crew actually throws Eleanor a surprise party for her birthday, and Eleanor is kind of loving it. She's starting to like the popular crew. Instead of being fake friends with them to try to ruin them, she's like happy to just have a party thrown for her and have friends that cared about her. Drea shows up to this party and tells Eleanor, like, you're losing the plan, you're not pretending anymore. They just have a big falling out as a duo. What I loved about this movie so much is that it had so many nods and references to 90s and 2000s movies without being an exact copy of any single one. One similar movie I thought about right away was John Tucker Must Die, which I had just rewatched like 2 days before seeing Do Revenge. John Tucker Must Die is obviously much more of a trashy movie. It's honestly a perfect time capsule of the 2000s in all its problematic glory. It's funny because Do Revenge is so much more artistically curated and fancy and aesthetic, but the underlying plot just reminded me of John Tucker Must Die. Like, Max felt like a John Tucker. For example, when they try to expose him, he spun it to be a positive thing for himself because he is that powerful at the school. The same thing happens with John Tucker. And Eleanor is kind of the Brittany Snow character, Kate, that gets made over from being a loser that no one knows. Even the part where Eleanor gets her makeover and just walks by Max and that's all it takes to get his attention, that's exactly the scene from John Tucker where Kate walks by him in her cheerleading outfit and John Tucker is already asking who she is. Also, Eleanor's love interest is actually Max, the popular guy's sister, who's a lesbian or queer. We meet her early on in the movie when they start school in the fall. It reminds me so much of the other Tucker in John Tucker, played by Penn Badgley, who is the actual love interest of Kate, Brittany Snow's character. I kept calling Gabby in my head the other Tucker. Like, Gabby takes notice of Eleanor before the makeover, and then later on in the movie is like, I liked the old Eleanor too, like, you look great now, but I like the old you. Also, the thing about Max dating girls from different cliques to not get caught, that's literally John Tucker's playbook. He learned that from him. And then I also noticed a lot of nods to one of our favorite teen movies of all time, Mean Girls, of course. There's one point where Gabby is giving Eleanor a tour of all the cliques at the school, and it feels like the Gen Z version of the tour that Janice and Damien give to Katie Heron when they're describing like the cafeteria cliques. There's also a moment of Drea like surveying her chaos that she created at school that felt like that moment where Regina George is like seeing the madness she caused. There's also one point that felt like a very direct reference when it's the Instagram witch girl. It's during the tripping scene, but she uses her shoe to be like, Mom, can you pick me up? I'm scared. She doesn't say that line, but it's the same sentiment, and it reminded me of the Mean Girls one. And also, I feel like the moment where Eleanor gets called out by Drea about how she's become the popular group and that she made her is like when Regina's like, I created Katie. Right after that, Gabby talks to Eleanor and is like, you've changed, like, because Eleanor starts to question Drea about whether she has evidence that Max even leaked the sex tape. So basically, Eleanor backtracks on believing women, which is, you know, a bad sin. It's problematic. And Gabby overhears and kind of gives her this speech that's like, where are you? What have you become? And it reminded me of this speech in Mean Girls where Janice tells Katie, you're not pretending anymore. You're plastic. Cold, shiny, hard plastic. Damien's like, I want my pink shirt back, that whole thing. It reminded me a lot of that scene. But as much as the story resembled those movies, then the aesthetic was a little more elevated and had more inspirations from like 90s teen movies. This landscape I'm less familiar with, but from interviews I've seen of the creators, the movie was influenced by Cruel Intentions, which that's why the inclusion of Sarah Michelle Gellar is a nod in and of itself to Cruel Intentions, but also movies like Clueless and Heathers, which I picked up on Clueless, I picked up on Heathers, especially with the cute uniforms they wear, and also more of the dark comedy side of it felt like those movies. Oh, also the movie Jawbreaker, which I have not seen and I need to, because I've heard of it before, but I forget about it because I think it was such a critically and financial flop that it doesn't get much press. It's more of a cult classic, and no one ever talks about this, but because it's too embarrassing to talk about, but it can be hard to know about the pop culture or media before you were born if your parents didn't expose you to it. And it's like, yeah, if your parents are artsy hipsters, then you heard, the Beatles at a young age, or these movies of big directors. But for me, having a family from Mexico that likes, mainstream superhero movies and box office comedies, like, I did not get exposed to a lot of vintage or historically important works, and I didn't go to film school either, so maybe in school is where you learn some of that, but I'm still discovering what teen movies came before my time and were important for the later teen movies that I'm covering now, or even the teen movies I grew up with. That being said, I've heard of Jawbreaker before, but I'd never seen the visuals, and it's very campy, so I'm probably going to watch that soon. I've seen parts of Heather, I've seen Clueless. I haven't seen Cruel Intentions, but I looked that trailer up, and I don't know how I feel about the incest part of that one. Feels like a little edgy for today's time, but I might watch that one too. It seems like an important, influential one. Also, a more recent movie that Do Revenge reminded me of was Thoroughbreds, which was kind of like a smaller, I would bet it's A24. I actually don't know that for sure, but feels like an A24 kind of movie. It's kind of similar in how it's like a duo that's like a preppy rich girl and a more grungy girl, and they team up to do something sinister. Though in Thoroughbreds it is more intense. I think it is a murder. That one also has a lot of inspiration from like Clueless and Heathers in the aesthetic. So if you like Do Revenge, I would recommend checking out Thoroughbreds. It kind of has a similar vibe. But yeah, the aesthetics of Do Revenge reflect these movies a lot more. Also, to me, it kind of had a Wes Anderson vibe at times. So that was interesting. Like, I think the pastel color palettes and some of the wide shots where it was like symmetrical and very ornate, it felt a little bit of Wes Anderson put in. But when I look at Cruel Intentions and Jawbreaker, it does feel like a mixture of those two styles as well. There's so many like beautiful shots in this movie that I feel like could make like a beautiful poster. Like, I love a movie like that where just screen grabs of it look like art. And the writer-director Jennifer Robinson said that that was very important to her, and how she worked very closely with the costume and production designers to make frames that were all very cohesive and intentional. Also, it was just an edginess. It was campy. They included psychedelics as part of it. They say the word cunt, which I enjoyed. It felt very feminine. Another aspect of this movie that I thought was interesting was how it depicted Gen Z. It's an interesting movie because the aesthetics are so referential to past movies that it has a timeless feel to it. The fashion in this movie doesn't scream realistic Gen Z. There's Gen Z elements to some of the fashion trends, but it's all like turned up several notches, where this movie won't feel like a full time capsule of Gen Z. However, it did infuse Gen Z culture within it in a very interesting way that, like, if you watch it a decade from now, you'll probably notice what aspects of it are Gen Z things. So they have bucket hats, they have high-waisted stuff, little tops, sheer, a lot of bright colors, chunky kind of jewelry, Instagram witch culture. That's very Gen Z, it feels like. Something I thought was kind of a Gen Z thing, Drea and Eleanor are talking about Sarah Michelle Gellar, the principal, and they're like, I want her to run me over with her Tesla. I want her to bury my body in the ground and start the search party. They were like trying to one up each other, like with violent language, which this is a very Gen Z kind of thing to me. It's how they talk online, where fans of a certain celebrity will ask for violence from the celebrity towards them. It is how they express love. I feel like a nature commentator on Gen Z. Also, Eleanor kept calling Drea revenge mommy. That feels very online Gen Z type of language. So it was infused with those time capsule elements that I think will become more clear over time. So let's get into the twist. I purposely stopped the plot a little earlier and wanted to talk about the twist separately. We left off with Drea and Eleanor going their separate ways, and Drea discovers that her car is malfunctioning, and when she calls the mechanic says someone stole your spark plug earlier in the movie and also now, and that usually means someone's messing with you. So that tips her off that potentially Eleanor has been messing with her. Drea goes to visit Carissa at the rehab facility to get Carissa's side of the story. And there she finds out that Carissa was not the girl who ruined Eleanor's life. She did not start a rumor that Eleanor was a predator, and Carissa's like, Drea, it was you who started that rumor. Eleanor used to go by Nora, and you would call her Nosy Nora, and you started a rumor that she held you down and tried to kiss you after she came out to you. So Drea starts putting everything together and realizes that Eleanor this whole time has been trying to ruin her. This twist really gagged me a bit. I was shook. This whole time Eleanor had this nervous vibe and awkward thing going where Drea felt like the one in control and Eleanor was just doing whatever she said because she wanted friendship or whatever. But actually, Eleanor was masterminding this whole thing. She planned everything from the very beginning, even before she met her at tennis camp, to try to take her down for ruining her life when she was 13. I thought it was kind of crazy because Eleanor did seem like so nice, but I mean, I guess that's what a good twist does. It catches you off guard. It definitely caught me off guard. I was gagged, and it was at this point where I was like, okay, this movie is a serve, and I understand why it's 2 hours long. It got the teen movie out of the way in the traditional hour and 30 minutes, and then it got interesting. Drea comes home and Eleanor's there, and it's this creepy kind of villain moment where Eleanor's like, oh, cat's out of the bag, and Drea's freaked out. She's like, I already lost the AO, what else do you want from me? And Eleanor's like, well, I want you to go to the final senior party called the admissions party, and there's no social media and phones allowed. Eleanor wants Drea to go to that party and record everyone doing debaucherous things or bad things and expose that footage later. And then that footage is going to get traced back to Drea for exposing everybody. So Eleanor just has this sick, twisted finale planned. And Drea's like, I'm not going to do all that. And then Eleanor's like, well, I'm going to fire your mom by framing her for having drugs. Drea, early on in the movie, taught Eleanor how to frame somebody for drugs. She framed Sophie Turner's character, who she sent to rehab on false pretenses. Eleanor threatens Drea's mom, and Drea ends up agreeing to this plan. Eleanor's also like, oh, and I told Russ what you did to Carissa. And so Drea is calling Russ all panicked after that, driving, and then Russ is like, Eleanor didn't tell me anything. So she confessed basically. Oh, you have to watch it to understand. It's convoluted, but it was so good. And then Eleanor hits Drea with her car and sends her to the hospital while she's on the phone with Russ. That I thought was a little out of line. Like, Eleanor, especially with how the ending turned out, like, Eleanor hit her with her car. Like, crashed into her. There's a lot of details to this movie. Speaking of details, I loved so many of the little details in this movie. There's one point where Drea goes to the rehab center and she sees Sophie Turner's character there, and Sophie Turner is doing crafts and draws her as a devil with horns. And then when you see Drea, her little clips look like devil horns. Like, I feel like this is the kind of movie I could watch a million times and find little details every time. In Eleanor's room, towards the beginning, we see this big painting of Jackie O with smeared lipstick, and then later on in the movie, Eleanor smears her lipstick in this evil villain way. I'm sure you could analyze the costuming to death on this. I'm not a fashion expert in that way, but I feel like it's just the kind of movie you could unravel and find new things in upon every rewatch. So the conclusion happens at this admissions party. Drea and Eleanor go together, and Eleanor gives Drea this sneaky brooch cam to record everybody to execute the plan. And then when they're all hanging out with the popular kids and they're doing drugs, Drea reminds everybody that Eleanor is Nosy Nora from back in the day. And all the popular kids start bullying Eleanor because they realize who she is, and Eleanor runs away all sad. The whole movie is narrated by both Drea and Eleanor at separate times, and Eleanor is kind of feeling not great about executing her evil plan. She does mention in the narration that she was going to call off her evil plan when her and Drea started becoming friends, and then when Drea went kind of psycho after getting rejected from Yale, she put the plan back in motion because she realized Drea hadn't changed at all. Eleanor, in the narration, recognizes she doesn't feel good about what she's done to Drea, so they both feel shitty, and they finally have this final confrontation where it's like, we both feel shitty, we actually liked each other's friendship, and can we just call a truce? They agree to be friends again, and then Max comes out and is like, I overheard everything, and how dare you, and he's pissed at these girls trying to mess with him all year. He gives this classic evil villain monologue. He ends up admitting that he did leak Drea's sex tape at the beginning. He was not hacked. However, Drea, moments before, had destroyed the brooch camera because she was done with everything. Max confesses all this and then leaves them to go do coke with some other girl. And then Eleanor's like, actually, I had a backup camera, and she had a camera to record him. And it was a callback to an earlier line in the movie where Drea's like, it's called double assurance, sweetie. They're excited because they can finally actually expose Max. So they play that footage to the entire party, and finally the students turn on Max for real. It goes against all of his performative allyship stuff. This finale kind of reminded me of John Tucker Must Die, because at the end of that movie, they also play a video to everybody and expose things, and that's how that is resolved at a party. But this was obviously more artsy-fartsy. So Eleanor and Drea end up being best friends. They're kind of like messed up soulmates, and they forgive each other. I kind of thought this was a little crazy and far-fetched. I mean, they obviously had a sweet, twisted friendship, but after Eleanor was revealed as like the mastermind evil villain, you know, Drea would be done with her because she's kind of crazy, and Drea was kind of crazy too, so they seem like they would be toxic together, but I assume the message is they learned their lesson after this year and remained friends after this. And we see in the credits that they also resolve things with their respective love interests, which again, I think is also kind of far-fetched that they got forgiven. I know it's a campy movie, it's not like realistic, but there were a lot of mean things done, and something of those things seem beyond forgiveness to me, like intentionally crashing into someone's car. Ooh, before I wrap up, I want to talk about the soundtrack. They had a budget this time around. They had a lot of fun music in it. In an interview I saw, Jennifer Robinson, the writer, said it was very important for her. It was great. It had For the Girls by Haley Kiyoko, which I've heard in a lot of media. Brutal by Olivia Rodrigo. I'm sure that wasn't cheap. They had some Rosalia in there, some Carolyn Polachek. Happier Than Ever by Billie Eilish, another, I'm sure, very expensive one. Also, it was fun to hear Silk Chiffon by Muna in this. And of course, it was in the scene with the girl-on-girl romance happening between Eleanor and Gabby. If you don't know, Muna is a band that is quite lesbian. So that was Do Revenge. I mean, I was very impressed by this movie. I liked how it had so many references without copying any one thing. I'm so happy for Camila Mendes and Maya Hawke. These feel like cool, great roles of them, and all the interviews I've seen of them, they really respect each other's talent, and they both seem very professional. As much as Maya Hawke is like a nepotism baby, she seems to take her craft very seriously. And they both seem excited that their respective franchise shows are ending soon. Stranger Things and Riverdale are both having their final seasons coming up. I love this movie. Recommend it. I would love to hear what you thought of it. What was your favorite scene or moment, or were you gagged by the twist? Because I definitely was. That was my favorite moment, I think, the reveal of the twist. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed. I put out new videos once or twice a week about TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things. And you can follow me at Miscellaneous on Instagram or Twitter to find out about new videos, or just turn on the bell notification here on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!